Hi, and welcome back. This is actually our last, the last section of the Racketty Packetty House by Frances Hodgson Burnett. But it's been great. I've had such a fun time reading with all of you. I'm gonna untie this bow so we can get at it, get at the book. And there was one picture when I was, I realized that there was one picture that I hadn't shown you guys that you might like to see. It is from the last part that we read, but the picture was towards the end of the book, so I hadn't really noticed it. But this was when Peter Piper, when Lady Patsy, do you remember she came, the first time she came down the ladder and came into Racketty Packetty House, and after they were engaged, and Peter Piper was showing her around. This is a really good image, picture of what Lady Patsy looks like. It says they went all over the house together, and it's sort of a fun picture, so I just wanted to make sure you guys saw that. It's kind of fun. Looking very, very happy. Excellent. All right, so I'm going to find the bookmark. We were on page 96. And do you remember that Cynthia, when she was playing with the, oh my gosh, almost forgot to open the dollhouse. My grandmother's dollhouse. Oh, here's a puppy. Excellent. There we go. Do you remember that when we left off, Cynthia was playing with the tidy castle, but she was playing that everybody had scarlet fever, and they were all really sick. Not Patsy, because she was over at Racketty Packetty House, but everybody else was really, really sick. And then right in the middle of their agony, Cynthia suddenly got up and went away and just left them to their fate, as if it didn't matter at all. And that's where we left off. So we're going to find out what happens now. Well, in the middle of the night, Meg and Peg and Lady Patsy wakened all at once. "Do you hear a noise?" said Meg, lifting her head from her ragged old pillow. "Yes, I do," said Peg, sitting up and holding her ragged old blanket up to her chin. Lady Patsy jumped up with feathers sticking up all over her hair because they had come out of the holes in the ragged old bed. She ran to the window and listened. "Oh, Meg and Peg," she cried out, "it comes from the castle. Cynthia has left them all raving in delirium, and they're all shouting and groaning and screaming." Meg and Peg jumped up too. "Let's go and call Kilmanskeg and Ridiculous and Gustavus and Peter Piper," they said. And they rushed to the staircase and met Kilmanskeg and Ridiculous and Gustavus and Peter Piper coming scrambling up, panting because the noise had awakened them as well. They were all over at Tidy Castle in a minute. They just tumbled over each other to get there, the kind-hearted things. The servants were every one fast asleep. The loudest groans came from Lady Gwendolen and Lord Francis because their mustard plasters were blistering them frightfully. Ridiculous took charge because she was the one who knew most about illness. She sent Gustavus to waken the servants and then ordered hot water and cold water and ice and brandy and poultices and shook the trained nurse for not attending to her business and took off the mustard plasters and gave gruel and broth and cough syrup and castor oil and ipecacuanha, and every one of the Racketty Packettys massaged and soothed and patted and put wet cloths on heads until the fever was gone and the castle dolls all lay back on their pillows, pale and weak, but smiling faintly at every Racketty Packetty they saw, instead of turning up their noses and tossing their heads and sniffing loudly and just scorning them. Lady Gwendolen spoke first, and instead of being haughty and disdainful, she was as humble as a newborn kitten. "Oh, you dear, shabby, disrespectable, darling things," she said. "Never, never will I scorn you again. Never, never." And here is a picture of Lady Gwendolen saying that while the Racketty Packetty dolls are helping her. She said, "Never, never again am I going to scorn you." Yeah, she kind of learned a lesson. Never, never. "That's right," said Peter Piper in his cheerful, rather slangy way. "You take my tip. Never you scorn anyone again. It's a mistake. Just you watch me stand on my head. It'll cheer you up." And he turned 6 somersaults just like lightning and stood on his head and wiggled his ragged legs at them until suddenly they heard a snort from one of the beds. And it was Lord Hubert beginning to laugh, and then Lord Francis laughed, and then Lord Hubert shouted, and then Lady Doris squealed, and Lady Muriel screamed, and Lady Gwendolen and the Duchess rolled over and over in their beds, laughing as if they would all have fits. "Oh, you delightful, funny, shabby old loves," Lady Gwendolen kept saying. "To think that we scorned you." "They'll be all right after this," said Peter Piper. "There's nothing cures scarlet fever like cheering up. Let's all join hands and dance round and round once for them before we go back to bed. It'll throw them into a nice light perspiration, and they'll drop off and sleep like tops." And they did it, and before they had finished, the whole lot of them were perspiring gently and snoring as softly as lambs. When they went back to Racketty Packetty House, they talked a good deal about Cynthia and wondered why she had left her scarlet fever so suddenly. And at last, Ridiculous made up her mind to tell them something she had heard. "The Duchess told me," she said, rather slowly because it was bad news. "The Duchess said that Cynthia went away because her mamma had sent for her, and her mamma had sent for her to tell her that a little girl princess is coming to see her tomorrow. Cynthia's mamma used to be a maid of honor to the Queen, and that's why the little girl princess is coming." The Duchess said, and here Ridiculous spoke very slowly indeed. The Duchess said that the nurse was so excited, she said she did not know whether she stood on her head or her heels, and she must tidy up the nursery and have that Racketty Packetty old doll's house carried downstairs and burned early tomorrow morning. That's what the Duchess said. Meg and Peg and Killenskeg clutched at their hearts and gasped, and Gustavus groaned, and Lady Patsy caught Peter Piper by the arm to keep from falling. Peter Piper gulped, and then he had a sudden, cheerful thought. "Perhaps she was raving in delirium," he said. "No, she wasn't," said Ridiculous, shaking her head. "I had just given her hot water and cold and gruel and broth and castor oil and ipecacuanha and put ice almost all over her. She was as sensible as any of us. Tomorrow morning we shall not have a house over our heads." And she put her ragged old apron over her face and cried. And here she is, with a ragged apron over her face, crying. Oh, they are in a tough situation. Oh dear. If she wasn't raving in delirium, said Peter Piper, we shall not have any heads. You had better go back to the castle tonight, Patsy. Rackety Packety House is no place for you. Then Lady Patsy drew herself up so straight that she nearly fell over backwards. I will never leave you, she said. And Peter Piper couldn't make her. You can just imagine what a doleful night it was, though. They went all over the house together, looked at every hole in the carpet, every piece of stuffing sticking out of the dear old shabby sofas, and every broken window and chair leg and table and ragged blanket, and the tears ran down their faces for the first time in their lives. About 6 o'clock in the morning, Peter Piper made a last effort. Let's all join hands in a circle, he said quite faintly, and dance round and round once more. But it was no use. When they joined hands, they could not dance. And when they found they could not dance, they all just tumbled down in a heap and cried instead of laughing. And Lady Patsy lay with her arms around Peter Piper's neck. Now, here is where I come in again, Queen Crosspatch, who is telling you this story. I always come in just at the nick of time when people like the Rackety Packetys are in trouble. I walked in at 7 o'clock. Get up off the floor, I said to them all, and they got up and stared at me. They actually thought I did not know what had happened. A little girl princess is coming this morning, said Peter Piper, and our house is going to be burned over our heads. This is the end of Rackety Packety House. Oh, no it isn't, I said. You leave this to me. I told the princess to come here, though she doesn't know it in the least. A whole army of my working fairies began to swarm in at the nursery window. The nurse was working very hard to put things in order, and she had not sense enough to see fairies at all. So she did not see mine, though there were hundreds of them. As soon as she made one corner tidy, they ran after her and made it untidy. They held her back by her dress and hung and swung on her apron until she could scarcely move and kept wondering why she was so slow. She could not make the nursery tidy, and she was so flurried she forgot all about Rackety Packety House again, especially as my working fairies pushed the armchair close up to it so that it was quite hidden again. And there it was when the little girl princess came with her ladies-in-waiting. My fairies had only just allowed the nurse to finish the nursery. Meg and Peg and Kilmanskeg and Ridiculous and Gustavus and Peter Piper and Lady Patsy were huddled up together, looking out of one window. They could not bear to be parted. I sat on the arm of the big chair and ordered my working fairies to stand ready to obey me the instant I spoke. The princess was a nice child and was very polite to Cynthia when she showed her all her dolls, and last but not least, Tidy Castle itself. She looked at all the rooms and the furniture and said polite and admiring things about each of them. But Cynthia realized that she was not so much interested in it as she thought she would be. The fact was that the princess had so many grand dolls' houses in her palace that Tidy Castle did not surprise her at all. It was just when Cynthia was finding this out that I gave the order to my working fairies. Put "Push the armchair away," I commanded, "very slowly so that no one will know it's being moved." So they moved it away very, very slowly, and no one saw that it had stirred. But the next minute, the little girl princess gave a delightful start. "What is that?" she cried out, hurrying towards the unfashionable neighborhood behind the door. Cynthia blushed all over, and the nurse actually turned pale. The Racketty Packetties tumbled down in a heap beneath their window and began to say their prayers very fast. "Oh, it's only a shabby old doll's house, Your Highness," Cynthia stammered out. It belonged to my grandmama, and it ought not to be in the nursery. I thought you had burned it, nurse." "Burned?" the little girl princess cried out in the most shocked way. "Why, if it was mine, I wouldn't have burned it for the world. Oh, please push the chair away and let me look at it. There are no doll's houses like it anywhere in these days." And when the armchair was pushed aside, she scrambled down onto her knees just as if she was not a little girl princess at all. "Oh," she said, "how funny and dear. What a darling old doll's house. It is shabby and wants mending, of course, but it is almost exactly like one my grandmama had. She kept it among her treasures and only let me look at it as a great treat." Cynthia gave a gasp, for the little girl princess's grandmama had been the queen, and people had knelt down and kissed her hand and had been obliged to go out of the room backwards before her. The little girl princess was simply filled with joy. She picked up Meg and Peg and Kilmanskag and Gustavus and Peter Piper as if they had been really a queen's dolls. "Oh, the darling dears," she said. "Look at their nice faces and their funny clothes. Just like my grandmama's dolly's clothes. Only these poor things do so want new ones. Oh, I should like to dress them again just as they used to be dressed and have the house all made just as it used to be when it was new." "That old Racketty Packetty house?" said Cynthia, losing her breath. "Oh, if it were mine, I should make it just like my grandmama's, and I should love it more than any doll's house I have. I never saw anything as nice and laughing and good-natured as these dolls' faces. They look as if they had been having fun ever since they were born. Oh, if you were to burn them in their home, I could never forgive you." I never will, Your Highness," stammered Cynthia, quite overwhelmed. Suddenly, she started forward. "Why, there is the lost doll," she cried out. "There's Lady Patsy. How did she get into Racketty Packetty house?" "Perhaps she went there to see them because they were so poor and shabby," said the little girl princess. "Perhaps she likes this one. Perhaps she likes this one." And she pointed to Peter Piper. "Do you know, when I picked them up, their arms were around each other. Please let her stay with them." "Oh," she cried out the next instant and jumped a little. "I felt as if the boy one kicked his leg." And it was actually true, because Peter Piper could not help it, and he had kicked out his ragged leg for joy. He had to be very careful not to kick any more when he heard what happened next. As the princess liked Racketty Packetty house so much, Cynthia gave it to her for a present, and the princess was really happy. And before she went away, she made a little speech to the whole Racketty Packetty family, whom she had set all in a row in the ragged old, dear old, shabby old drawing room where they had had so much fun. "You are going to come and live with me, funny, good-natured loves," she said, "and you shall all be dressed beautifully again, and your house shall be mended and papered and painted and made as lovely as ever it was. And I am going to like you better than all my other dolls' houses, just as Grandmama liked hers." And then she was gone. And every bit of it came true. Racketty Packetty House was carried to a splendid nursery in a palace, and Meg and Peg and Kilmanskeg and Ridiculous and Gustavus and Peter Piper were made so gorgeous that if they had not been so nice, they could have grown quite proud. But they didn't. They only grew jollier and jollier, and Peter Piper married Lady Patsy, and Ridiculous's left leg was mended, and she was painted into a beauty again, but she always remained the useful one. And the dolls in the other dolls' houses used to make deep curtsies when a Racketty Packetty house doll passed them, and Peter Piper could scarcely stand it because it always made him want to stand on his head and laugh. And so when they were curtsied at, because they were related to the royal doll's house, they used to run into their drawing room and fall into fits of giggles, and they could only stop them all by joining hands together in a ring and dancing round and round and round, kicking up their heels and laughing until they tumbled down in a heap. And what do you think of that for a story? Doesn't it prove to you what a valuable friend a fairy is, particularly a queen one? And that is the end of Racketty Packetty House by Frances Hodgson Burnett. What a fun story. What I'm going to do is tie this back up again until another time when I'm sure I'm going to have a chance to read it again sometime, but I'm not sure when. So I'm going to tie this back up, and I'm so glad that you were able to come. I'm going to close up my grandmother's dollhouse also, and it makes me think that I might need to do a little work on this. That princess who's going to fix up her dollhouse, maybe I'll do a little bit more on this one too. I'm going to close it up for now, though. All right, wonderful. Take care. But I hope that you'll come and visit us in the Tide Pool bookshop when we do open. Take care.